Hello, my name is Rishi Sapra. I am a senior consultant at Altius, and today I'll be walking you through my report on awards and grants given to charities and user-led organisations in the UK as part of the 360 Giving Data Visualisation Challenge. So we start with a little bit of context and background on the data sources used and the types of analysis performed in this report. So the primary analysis in this report is on themes, and the themes come from a mapping of charity classifications to theme names. These charity classifications have been obtained from the UK Charity Commission API, which has been made kindly available by Ollie Benson on https://olib.uk. And it uses the charity numbers in a GrantNav dataset, passes those into the API in order to return the data. Where a charity has multiple charity classifications that map to themes, and most of the organisations do, then any awards that is given to that charity is split equally amongst the relevant themes. So if a charity has classifications that map to themes of youth and education and research, then a £10,000 award to that charity will be split between £3,333 across each of those three themes. So next we come onto the key analysis page called charity funding, and at the top we can see the total awarded to charities who are currently registered with UK Charities Commission. So between 1998 and 2018 there was 4.24 billion given by 73 funders across 15,000 charities. At a glance over those 20-year periods, we can see which themes have received the most money, so education, disability and youth, and which funders. So by far the biggest being the Big Lottery Fund, actually over half of the total amount awarded over that period, and along with Sports England and Esme Farnham. This is interactive, so we can select a theme and we can see which funders gave the most to it. So for example, we've selected a £672 million given to education theme, and we can see that the vast majority of that, 400 million, came from the Big Lottery Fund. 62 million came from the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, and we can also see that 9,616 charities had a classification relating to charity. When we hover over one of these bars, so say education for example, we can see the pattern of giving. So we can see a steady increase since 2010 in the pattern of awards granted to charities associated with education, and we can see a spike in 2015. This year only reflects half a year, so potentially that trend looks to continue, although it looks fairly low given where we are still 7 months into the year. If we now click just on Gatsby, so we click off that chart and we click on Gatsby, we can see which themes this funder has supported and when. So it's only given to 16 distinct charities in the 20-year period. Education is its most popular, followed by research and arts and culture. If we look at arts and culture, we can see a big spike in 2008 as well as in 2000. If we want to focus the analysis just on the last few years, say, we can select one or more years on the left-hand side of the slicer. We can also filter for particular regions if we wanted just to say to focus on those charities that are based in London or the North East, for example. And if we wanted to only look at those where the award amount is of a certain value or greater than a certain value, we could use this slider here to filter only for those particular ones. If instead of looking at the trend of giving to themes or by funders over time, we wanted to look at the charities that the funds were given to, we can click on the by recipient box here. Now what this is showing is the same graphs, but instead of looking at over time when we hover over the bars, we can then see the total breakdown by recipient. We can see which charities associated with education receive the most funds. So if we click off this and we just click on education, we can see, for example, that the Sainsbury Laboratory have received the most funds. And if we look specifically at funds received, for example, by the Big Lottery, we could then see which particular funds those were granted to, so which particular recipients. So we could see they're very different recipients in terms of disability and education. So even though education overall, we had the other recipients, and hereby for the big lottery, Preschool Learning Alliance forms the largest amount of funds given by that particular funder. So next we can move on to theme detail, and this gives us the themes and funders that we want to focus our analysis on. So initially we were looking at across themes and across different funders, and now we're looking at one specific theme in detail. And by default, this is the first one in alphabetical order, which is selected on here on the right hand side, animals. And we can see that there was £12 million of funding associated with registered charities over time. And we can see there was a large spike in 2006, for example. Drilling into this line chart, so we can enable drill down on this chart by clicking on here and drill into 2006. We can see that I was in November 2006. We can drill it even further and see specifically that it was an award that was given on the 25th of November. The charts underneath update to show these funds, and it shows they were all from the Big Lottery Fund and all to the charity to the Soil Association Limited. We now click on Reset to take us back to the beginning, and we select a different theme. So perhaps this time if we select disability, we can now see the trended giving over time at the top, and underneath we see the key funders and recipients for that theme over time. So clicking on a particular element, so say for example for this on this 10 million given to the National Children's Bureau in 2014, we can see that all of these funds were from the same funder and were one particular grant given in 2014. If we drill down further into there, we can see actually it was one particular grant on 12th of May 2014. Next, we'll look at funder detail. So now we're focusing on analysis on one particular funder at a time. In this case, now it is the first funder selected in the list, which is AB Charitable Trust. And they've given £4 million over the past 5 years. So from 2013 is the first time they awarded any grants or awards. And you can see there's a fairly consistent growth in the amount that they've given. We can see that they've given to charities that have a fairly diverse set of classifications. So we can see actually they've given to charities that across art and science, that are classified with education, ethnic minorities, general other, housing, and poverty, for example. So we can also then click on one of those elements. So say we click on poverty associated with 2014. We could then, this now then focuses the rest of the charts just on that particular £104,000 that was given to charities associated with poverty. We can then see on the right which those recipients were in which months. So we can see in January it was 15k given to Central England Law Centre Limited. In April, £10,000 to advising communities. And in October, we had 10,000 to Detention Action, 10,000 to Peace Brigades International UK, and 10,000 to Southampton and Winchester Visitors Group. We can also then see the breakdown of that 2014, and we can see the breakdown by any of these. If we hold down Control, so we have this poverty selected in 2014 at the moment, we can then hold down Control and click on a particular recipient in, say, a particular month. And now this shows us everything else updates to be able to just reflect that £10,000 that was given then. So whilst we have one page here for clicking on theme detail or one on funder detail, back on the charity funding page, we can also get to this by drilling through from this page. So this page provides an overview of the themes and of the funders. And if we're interested in a particular theme here or in a particular funder, so if there's something that draws our attention, we can say we wanted to focus on youth, for example. We could right click, select drill through, and drill through into theme detail. This will now then update this page just to focus on that theme that we drilled through. So it'll take a minute there to update. It's a fairly large data set. But once it updates, now we can see it's focused on the youth theme. And the same thing applies to funders. Once we click on if we right click and drill through onto, say, Sports England and drill through into funder detail, now we're looking at all the detail for this particular funder. So all of this analysis so far has been focused on giving to registered charities. And we can see that actually that's a relatively small portion of the overall giving. So there was only 4.2 billion given to charities who are currently registered with the UK's Charities Commission. But the total award value across all organisations was actually £24 billion. So only a sixth of that was given to currently registered charities. So another area of focus that was called for in the questions was around user-led organisations. And this is looking at the funders, the themes and types of organisations that are associated. So the types of organisations that are associated with user-led organisations. And these are those where the title or description of the grant contains the phrase user-led. So we can see that there are or have been, over the 20-year period, 146 such organisations. So if we look at the number received in a particular year, so if we look at, for example, 2018, and we look at how many actual user-led organisations were, well, let's look at 2017, we can see that actually only 15 user-led organisations were given funding in that particular time. So even though over the 20-year period in total, there have been 146 distinct user-led organisations, there have only been a handful who've been awarded grants and awards in each year. So we have the same consistent layout and the same graphs in types that we have for all the other pages. So here to explore. So we can see the overall trend in giving to user-led organisations at the line graph at the top. And again, we can drill down if we select on here or drill down using those into particular months and into particular days. And underneath, we have a breakdown by funder over time as well, so we can see that stacked by user-led organisation type, so registered charity, and this is where it returns a result from that API. Charity other is where the grant and that data contains a charity number, but it doesn't contain any results once it's been put into the API. So it's a charity that's not currently registered with that charity number released with the UK Charities Commission. Community and cooperative are where these are contained in the title and the description or in the recipient name. And other is other user-led organisations that don't meet any of these criteria. And again, we can focus, and we've also got a breakdown by theme. This is focusing just on these user-led registered charities, so just on these yellow organisations, so orange organisations here. And once again, we can also focus on data points which seem the most interesting. So if we look at the user-led registered charities, for example, in 2011, which received a fair chunk of the giving to user-led organisations in that year, then we can see the trend in that throughout the year as we draw through. So we can see all the way going through, and we can see a dip in there just after the summer, and then some spikes and troughs. So fairly seasonal throughout the year. And we can see the split between the various funders. We can see the vast majority in that year was given by the Big Lottery Fund, and some given by Esme Farnett. And we can also then drill down and look at those actually by month. So we can see actually all through the year, the funds were given by the Big Lottery Fund, and we can see the amount awarded in each month. And then in December, we can see the amount given, 72,000, by that particular funder. And the last page on this report is the mapping table, showing which charity classifications on the UK Charity Commission register map to which themes. So we can see here that actually what I've done is where those classifications don't map to a particular theme, so things like general charitable purposes or the general public mankind, or makes grants to organisations. So these classifications are more about how they give or what kind of services they provide rather than the theme itself. So for those, I've just said actually we can ignore those, and I've excluded those from the analysis. So if a charity had 6 classifications, including 3 from these ignored, and essentially for the purposes of this analysis, they only had 3. So all the other ones are themes that we're looking at here. So we've got things like environment, sports, animals, and this just helps to provide that bit of context to the reader to be able to explain how we've got to that classification and to the themes. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed navigating and exploring the funding data using this report.